Hello, boys, girls, and goblins. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Uncle Frank, and I hope you're having a great day. Now, in my previous video, I discussed the release of the Neopets Battledome TCG and gave my initial thoughts on it, some of my hopes for the game, and just my general feel for the vibe. Now, it's been a few days since that video went live, and I've had a chance to learn the rules and play a few games. And with all that said and done, let me give you my brief thoughts on the actual gameplay now that I've had some actual gameplay. And I think it's not bad. I don't think it's amazing. But I think it's good enough to have a following that can keep the game going for a few years if it's handled right. Now, the basic rules are very simple. There are 3 different decks. That might strike you as odd because in most TCGs there's only one deck, but this one has 3. There is the main deck, which is a 50-card deck. You can only have 2 of any given card in the deck. And then there is your Neopets deck, your Neopets pool, so to speak, from which you select the Neopets you're going to be battling with. And then there is your Rainbow Pool. Now, calling it the Rainbow Pool is a bit odd to me, but it is what it is. That's where you put the alternate versions of your Neopets that are pulled out by the paintbrush cards. Oh, and I have to mention you can only have 1 of any given fairy in a deck. I think I mentioned that in the previous video, but yeah, that's part of the rules. You can only have 1 of a given fairy, which is kind of odd, but they're pretty powerful, so I understand that choice. Now, much like in the Pokemon TCG, you are not competing to defeat your opponent through life point damage. You are trying to knock out their individual Neopets. Games are done in 3 rounds. It's a best 2 out of 3 simple round structure, but unlike in other card games where rounds are separate games within a match, rounds in Neopets are just continuations of previous rounds. Cards you used up in a 1 round are in the graveyard or the banished zone, the void, for the next round. And I think that's an interesting game structure because it allows you to make tactical decisions in 1 round that carry over to the next. And I'll get to that in just a bit. Now, besides the initial setup of 3 different decks, the actual gameplay is fairly simple and easy to grasp. After each player has selected a starting Neopet, which is placed face down, they decide who's going to go first randomly, coin flip, dice, whatever, and then the games can begin. Turn order is very simple. There's a draw phase, like most card games. You select a single card from the top of your deck, boom, simple. Then there's a training phase. And in this phase, you can take a code stone from your hand and place it onto a Neopet you have in play. Code stones have different effects. They can increase the strength, defense, or speed of a given Neopet, and we'll get to those stats in just a second. Then there's the preparation phase, where you can play a card from your hand, so long as your Neopet is the correct level to play that card. Not all cards have a level requirement, and the level is determined by how many code stones are attached to your Neopet. So if you have 1 code stone on a Neopet, your Neopet is level 1. If you have 5 code stones, your Neopet is level 5. Then there's the battle phase, and this happens on every turn except the first, like in most card games. Your Neopet attacks the opponent's Neopet, and like I said in the previous video, this card game uses dice, which is an interesting choice, in my opinion. Your Neopet's attack power determines how many dice you roll. Your opponent's Neopet's defense power determines how many dice they roll. For every dice you roll, a 4 or a 5 is a success. A 6 is a critical success, which only matters for attacking. If you get a critical success when you're attacking, that attack cannot be blocked. When you're defending, a critical success just means you block as normal, except against a critical success. Now, what's interesting about the combat is that when any Neopet is defeated, both Neopets are taken out of the game, put into the record space, or however they call it in the game. The loser is placed face down, the winner is placed face up, and all cards attached to them, as well as any fairies in play, go to the graveyard, or the void, in the case of fairies. Now, this is interesting for a few reasons. It means if you're hyper-aggressive early in the game, and you attach a lot of really powerful cards to your Neopet, even if you win, you're losing those cards. It's not like in Pokemon where you're rewarded by being able to keep your powerful cards that you've attached to your Pokemon, whether it be a special energy or something. In Neopets, if you use a powerful code stone, for instance, I'm sure they're going to print some eventually, a powerful piece of equipment, even if you win that battle, that challenge, that equipment's gone. It's going to the graveyard. But, of course, if a card is gone, Neopets has a lot of ways to bring them back. But even with the ability to bring your cards back from the graveyard and replay them, you have to be careful about where you're managing your resources, because these cards are a resource. You have to be careful with every victory you achieve in this game. Losses feel almost a bit balanced because you know that your opponent is losing the cards they put in play too, so they don't have a huge advantage going against your next Neopet. It's actually really cool. So as an example, let's say that I have a Neopet that I've put 6 cards on, and my opponent has a Neopet that he's only put like 3 cards on. If I beat that Neopet, I lose the 6 cards. My opponent loses the 3 cards too, but mine are still going to the graveyard. I don't get to carry that over to the next match. It's really something to think about. It's really something to be like strategic about when you're knee deep in the game. Also, something to think about is how many resources do you want to use on the current round? If you won round 1, for instance, and you're not doing so good on round 2, you're like, you know you're going to lose. Are you going to put a lot of good cards on your second Neopet to try to salvage the round? Or are you only going to put 1 or 2 code stones on it, maybe a piece of equipment, to maybe get lucky with the die rolls? And then, if you're not lucky, then you haven't lost too much. You can save all those resources in your hand for round 3, where you're a bit positioned stronger. I worded that sentence weird. It's a lot to think about, and I feel like this gives the game a very low entry point, skill-wise, but a very high potential ceiling, because, yeah, there's a lot of things that are decided by luck. You still have to get good die rolls. You still have to be very lucky when it comes to what you're drawing from the top of the deck. But there's a lot of choices you can make in between the rounds that can kind of give you a serious edge in the next one, which I think is really clever, and so far as game design is concerned. And it also means that you don't feel like you're suffering so much if you weren't that lucky in round 1, for instance. You lost your first Neopet, but you still have a lot of good cards in your hand, so round 2 might go better for you. Overall, I still have the apprehensions I had in my previous video. I still don't entirely trust Upper Deck to make a good card game that will last long, but this one seems like a lot of fun. Having actually played it, I've enjoyed the games I've had. There's a lot of different kinds of deck archetypes you can put together, even now in only the first set. There's some precons too, but even now with only 1 set really released, there's a lot of different deck builds I think you can go with, and there's a lot of fun I think that can be had. So all in all, I think it's good. I hope it lasts a long time. Just to reiterate some of the things I said in the previous video, I like Neopets, and I hope that this Neopets TCG lasts for a while, and I look forward to whatever else comes for it, you know? Now, that's all I've got to say for now. If you enjoyed this video, then consider leaving a like, because you'll be helping me get healthier. For every like this video gets, I will be doing 1 push-up in the next one, so look forward to that. The previous video got 22 likes. That's 22. Ugh.